The battlefield was silent now, but the silence was heavy, almost crushing. Smoke curled in the sky like dark ribbons, and the ground was littered with broken machines and fallen soldiers. Among them walked Daniel, a young human soldier who had survived when almost no one else had. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with dirt and blood, and his heart beat with both fear and defiance. He was alive, but he was no longer free. Alien soldiers surrounded him, their tall forms moving with strict order. Their armor glimmered faintly under the gray sky, and their strange weapons hummed with energy. Daniel had fought bravely, but in the end, human weapons had been no match for the alien empire's power. The aliens did not speak to him, not in words he could understand. They only motioned, pushing him forward with sharp gestures. He stumbled but kept moving. His boots dragged across the ruined ground, past the wreckage of tanks, past the still bodies of his comrades. He felt grief rising in his chest, but he refused to bow his head. If these creatures wanted to see him broken, they would have to wait. Soon he was brought to the center of the captured zone. A massive ship rested there, unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. It was shaped like a black spear piercing the sky itself. Its surface reflected the light in a way that seemed unnatural, bending it almost like water. The ship's gates opened and he was forced inside. The air within was colder, sharper. The walls pulsed with faint lights as though the ship itself was alive. Alien soldiers marched beside him until they reached a grand hall. At the far end of the hall, seated upon a high throne made of dark crystal, was the queen. Daniel had heard stories of her, the alien queen who led her people with ruthless strength. Some said she was taller than any human, with skin like polished stone and eyes that could burn through a man's soul. Others said she was cruel beyond measure, showing no mercy to her enemies. Now standing before her, Daniel realized the stories were only half true. She was tall, yes, and beautiful, in a way that was both strange and unsettling. Her skin was smooth with faint patterns that shifted like flowing ink. Her eyes were bright silver, piercing and cold. She wore armor shaped like flowing metal, and a crown that seemed to grow from her very head. Every movement she made carried the weight of power. The soldiers pushed Daniel to his knees. He looked up at her, refusing to bow completely. He would not give her the satisfaction. The queen rose slowly from her throne, each step echoing in the chamber. Her gaze never left him. When she finally stood over him, she spoke in a voice that was both harsh and melodic. The words were strange, but through some kind of translator device, he understood. "A human prisoner," she said, "one of the last left alive. You should feel honored. Few of your kind survive long enough to stand before me." Her words were sharp, meant to cut. The alien soldiers laughed softly, but Daniel did not flinch. He met her gaze with steady eyes. "I don't feel honored," he said. His voice was hoarse but steady. "You destroyed my home. You killed my friends. There's no honor in standing here." The queen tilted her head slightly, studying him as though he were some curious animal. Then she raised her hand. "You speak boldly," she said, "but boldness cannot save you. Your kind is weak. Your world will belong to us. And you—" She paused, her silver eyes narrowing. "You will serve as an example of what happens to those who resist." The soldiers moved closer, weapons ready. Daniel knew what was coming. They would strike him down here in front of their queen as nothing more than a spectacle. He clenched his fists, ready to face it without fear. But then, everything changed. The queen's gaze shifted. Her eyes were no longer cold but startled. She stared not at his face but at his chest. Slowly she reached forward, her clawed fingers stopping just short of touching him. The soldiers hesitated, confused. Daniel followed her eyes and realized what she was looking at. His necklace. It was a simple thing, a thin chain of silver with a small pendant hanging from it. The pendant was round, etched with an old design that had belonged to his mother. She had given it to him before she died, telling him never to take it off. To him, it was nothing more than a piece of family history, a memory of love in a world of war. But to the queen, it was something else entirely. Her hand trembled slightly as she pointed at it. Her voice, usually commanding, was softer now. "Where did you get that?" she demanded. Daniel frowned. "It was my mother's," he said. "Why? What does it matter to you?" The queen's eyes widened, and for the first time her mask of control seemed to falter. The court watched in silence as she stepped back, her gaze fixed on the pendant. "That symbol," she whispered, almost to herself. "It should not exist among humans. Not anymore. The chamber grew tense. The soldiers looked at one another, uneasy. The queen turned sharply, her cloak sweeping around her. "Do not touch him," she commanded. The alien guards froze, their weapons still in hand. None dared to question her. Daniel's mind raced. What was it about this necklace that could make even this ruthless queen hesitate? She turned back to him, her expression unreadable now. "You will not be executed," she said slowly. "Not yet. There are questions that must be answered." With a wave of her hand, the guards lifted him up, but this time without the same harshness. They led him to a side chamber, a place of confinement but not death. As he was taken away, Daniel glanced back at the queen. Her silver eyes followed him, still fixed on the necklace. For the first time since his capture, he saw something in her gaze that was not cruelty. It was fear, and that made him wonder, who was truly the prisoner now? Daniel sat alone in the chamber where the guards had left him. The walls were smooth and curved, glowing faintly as if lit from within. The air was strange, heavy with a metallic scent, and he could hear the low hum of engines far below. It was not a prison cell in the human sense. There were no bars, no chains, but it was still a cage. The door had sealed itself the moment the guards shoved him inside. He leaned against the wall, breathing slowly, trying to calm his racing thoughts. His hands touched the small pendant on his necklace, the one that had stopped the queen in her tracks. He remembered his mother's words when she gave it to him. "Keep this close, Daniel. One day it may mean more than you know." At the time, he thought she only meant it as comfort. Now he wasn't so sure. Why would an alien queen, leader of an empire that had crushed entire worlds, hesitate at the sight of a simple human trinket? Before he could find an answer, the door slid open. Two guards entered, tall and stern, their armor gleaming like obsidian. Between them walked the queen herself. She moved with calm grace, but her eyes were sharp, watching him with a strange intensity. The guards stayed at the door while she stepped forward. For a long moment, she said nothing. She simply looked at him, or rather at the necklace that hung from his neck. Daniel felt her gaze like a weight. Finally, she spoke. "Your mother gave you that?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, it belonged to her. She said it had been in our family for generations." The queen's silver eyes narrowed. "Generations!" She whispered the word as though testing it on her tongue. "Do you know what the symbol means?" Daniel glanced down at the pendant. The design was simple, two interlocking shapes within a circle. "No," he admitted. "I never knew. To me, it was just family, a memory of her." Her gaze sharpened. "That is not just a memory. That symbol is older than your species' place among the stars. It belongs to my people." Daniel blinked, confusion rushing through him. "Your people? How is that possible? Humans only just reached beyond our own world. My mother couldn't have known anything about aliens." The queen stepped closer, lowering her voice. "And yet she carried a relic that should not exist. Do you not see the weight of this?" Daniel swallowed hard. He didn't know what to say. He felt small before her, trapped between the crushing truth of war and the sudden strangeness of destiny. She studied him for a long time before speaking again. "In our oldest records, there is mention of a time when the stars were not divided, when different worlds shared knowledge. This symbol belonged to that time, to a people who sought unity, not conquest." Daniel frowned. "But that's just history, legends." Her lips curved slightly, not a smile, not mockery, but something in between. "Legends often hold more truth than men are willing to believe." The silence that followed was thick. Daniel's heart pounded. He wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but before he could, one of the guards spoke sharply in the alien tongue. The queen turned her head, listening. Her expression hardened. She nodded once, then faced Daniel again. "There are those who will not accept this. To them, you are nothing but an enemy soldier. They will call my hesitation weakness." Daniel stood taller even though he was still trapped. "So why keep me alive then? Why not let them finish it?" Her eyes glimmered. "Because I am not yet sure if killing you would serve my people or doom them." With that, she turned and left, her cloak sweeping behind her. The guards followed, the door sealing shut once more. Daniel was left alone again, but now his thoughts churned even faster. His necklace wasn't just a memory. It was a key to something far older, something that tied humans and aliens together. And the queen, his enemy, was the only one who knew why. The next day he was brought out of his chamber. Guards marched him through winding corridors until they entered a vast hall filled with light. Alien officials stood in rows, their armor shining, their eyes fixed on him with suspicion and contempt. At the front, the Queen sat on her throne. She rose as Daniel was pushed forward. "Speak," she commanded. Her voice echoed through the hall. "Tell them how you came to possess the relic." Daniel clenched his fists. He hated being paraded like this, hated their stares, but he lifted his chin and spoke clearly. "It was my mother's. She told me her mother gave it to her and so on. A family keepsake. That's all I know." Murmurs rippled through the court. Some officials scoffed, others looked troubled. One tall alien stepped forward. His armor was scarred, his eyes hard. "My queen," he said, his voice sharp, "this is nonsense. A human soldier claims to hold a sacred relic, and we are to believe it? He is lying. He wears a copy, nothing more." The Queen's gaze cut toward him. "Do you accuse me of not knowing my own people's mark?" The hall fell silent. The challenger bowed his head quickly but muttered, "Even if it is real, it does not matter. He is our enemy. He should be executed." Daniel's stomach tightened. He stood still, though, refusing to show fear. The Queen walked down the steps of her throne until she stood between Daniel and her officials. "He is more than an enemy now," she said firmly. "This symbol binds him to our past. If the relic has survived through human bloodlines, then there is more to his people than we believed." Another official hissed, "You risk everything for superstition." The Queen's eyes burned silver. "Call it superstition if you wish, but I will not dismiss signs when they stand before me. The relic is real, and until I uncover its truth, this human remains under my protection." Daniel felt a strange shift in the air. The aliens still looked at him with anger, but they no longer moved to strike. The Queen's word was law, and she had spoken. The gathering ended, but Daniel's world had only grown more uncertain. Later, back in his chamber, he sat with the pendant in his hands. He traced the shapes with his thumb, wondering how something so small could carry so much weight. He thought of his mother, her kind smile, her quiet strength. Did she know what this necklace really was? Or had she only carried it because it was tradition, without ever understanding its meaning? The door opened again, and the Queen entered once more. This time she came alone. "You stood bravely before them," she said. Daniel gave a bitter laugh. "I didn't have much choice, did I?" Her expression softened slightly, though her eyes remained sharp. "Still, you did not cower. Many would have." He shrugged. "Fear doesn't change anything. I've seen enough of war to know that." For the first time, her gaze shifted, not cold, not cruel, but thoughtful. "You are different from what I expected of humans," she admitted. "And you're different from what I expected of a queen who invades worlds," Daniel replied. Her lips curved faintly, almost like the shadow of a smile. "Perhaps we both find the other surprising." She reached out, her fingers brushing the pendant lightly. Daniel resisted the urge to pull back. Her touch was careful, almost reverent. "This symbol speaks of unity," she said softly, "of a time when war was not the only language between stars. Perhaps your mother carried it not just as memory but as destiny." Daniel shook his head. "I'm just a soldier. I don't believe in destiny." Her silver eyes met his. "Destiny does not require belief. It only requires that it be followed." The silence stretched between them. Daniel didn't know what to say. For the first time, he saw something human in her, something beyond the crown, the armor, the power. But he also knew this was only the beginning. If the relic tied their worlds together, then the road ahead would be filled with danger. And as he looked at the Queen, he realized something else. She was no longer just his captor. She was the only one who could unlock the truth. The Queen did not bring Daniel to the archives at first. She had him moved from the chamber where he had waded into a room that smelled of spice and metal. It was smaller than the great hall but warm with light. Her attendants left them alone, and for a moment the two of them simply looked at each other across the low table. "You asked to see me," Daniel said. His voice had less anger now. There was a tiredness under it that comes after a long fight. The Queen inclined her head. "You have questions. So do I." She reached for a small device on the table and tapped it. The wall shifted, revealing a long corridor lit by soft blue light. "Come. I will show you things my court will not see." They walked in silence through the corridors. The ship thrummed around them like a sleeping animal. At the end of the corridor, doors opened into a circular room. The ceiling was domed and covered with maps, lines that traced the paths of stars and long-dead trade routes. The room smelled faintly of oil and old paper. "This is the inner archive," the Queen said. "Only a few have permission to enter. Here lie our oldest records. They do not leave this place." Daniel's heart beat faster. He had seen scholar rooms on human worlds, dusty and quiet, but nothing like this. Shelves rose like trees, and each one held tablets, scrolls, and plates carved with tiny marks. At the center, a pedestal stood with a single glass case. Inside the case lay a plate, a thin ring with shapes like the pendant he wore. He felt cold. His hand went to the pendant automatically, as if to make sure it was still there. The Queen watched him closely. "You will sit." She nodded to a low chair. "I will show you why your family relic matters." She touched the glass case. The plate inside glowed faintly and rose. Around the room, the marks began to move, forming soft holograms of distant worlds. Daniel leaned forward. The images were like nothing he had ever seen. Planets connected by lines like threads, ancient cities, and a people with long robes and gentle faces. The Queen's voice was low. "Long before our empires, before walls rose between worlds, there were travelers who called themselves the bridge keepers. They kept the ways of travel, the language of trade, and the signs of peace. Their symbol was this mark." She pointed to the plate. It meant safe passage. It meant trust. Daniel listened, dizzy. "Why would my mother have it?" he asked. "Perhaps she did not know," the Queen said. "Perhaps she carried something passed down from another time. Or perhaps her people were once touched by the bridge keeper's work. It is not unheard of. Civilizations meet in ways that history forgets." She brought up an image of a far star. It showed a ship landing on a green world and people from two different forms meeting and sharing food. The Queen's eyes were soft as she watched it. There are records of a human world that once hosted an outpost. It was small and lonely. The outpost traded tools for stories. When the wars began, most records were lost. But this symbol remained in secret. It traveled in pockets, hidden in jewelry, sewn into cloth. Daniel thought of his mother folding clothes, whispering stories of a man who had gone to sea. He thought of small traditions that had no clear reason. He had never imagined they might be echoes from the stars. "Why hide it?" Daniel asked. "If it symbolizes peace, why not keep it openly?" The Queen's expression tightened. "Because peace can be a threat to those who profit from war." The bridge keepers were hunted. Their symbols were outlawed by those who wished to dominate trade and control worlds. They became legends, stories told at night. Only a few kept the sign alive. She turned to him with an intensity he had not seen before. "If the symbol still exists in your bloodline, then your family unknowingly carried a memory of a time when our peoples were linked. That memory is dangerous to those who profit from fear." Daniel swallowed. "So my mother was a bridge keeper?" he asked, almost laughing at the impossibility. "Not by name," the Queen said, "but she might have been part of a long chain. Or perhaps she simply loved someone who was. Either way, you wear a relic that connects you to something older than our battles." He felt small and large at the same time. Small, because armies and politics seemed to move like hands across him. Large, because an invisible thread tied his life to the histories of worlds. "Why tell me this?" Daniel asked. "Why risk your throne for a bit of history?" The Queen's silver eyes looked weary. "Because knowledge can change a mind. Because when my advisors call for more conquest, they do so in the belief that no bridge exists. They do not know what might happen if people remember the old paths. And because She paused, searching for the word. "I have grown tired of a crown that rules over burned worlds." Daniel blinked. He had expected a queen to be implacable, but now she sounded like someone who had carried weight for too long. "You don't want this war?" he said quietly. "I want my people to survive," she said. "I want more than expansion for expansion's sake. I have seen what endless hunger for control brings. But there are those in my court who see weakness in mercy. They would remove me if they could." A shadow passed across the maps. The Queen's voice was low again. "If your relic can prove that our past is linked, it may become a rallying symbol. It may give me reason to stop the march, or it may give my rivals reason to strike faster. That is why you are valuable and why you are at risk." Daniel thought of his unit, of the faces he could not clean from memory. He thought of the woman with silver eyes who had spared him because of a symbol. He was a soldier who knew how to do something useful when the need came. Survive, adapt, and fix what was broken. "Is there anything I can do?" he asked. The question surprised him. He had not planned to volunteer. But the archive felt like a place where something real could be done. The Queen's eyes softened. Your knowledge of human ways could help. She gestured to a table. We will need to confirm the relic's origins. The archive holds pieces, but not the whole story. There are places, old outposts, forgotten stations where more may be found. I cannot send my fleet searching openly. It would look like weakness, but perhaps a small team moving quietly could retrieve what we need. Daniel's mind spun. You want me to lead a team? He asked. She nodded. You know how to move without being seen. You know the lands. I would send you with a small squad that appears to be on a mission of conquest but is actually a search for relics. Her voice was practiced, like someone smoothing the edges of a plan. He thought of the men who had died because of orders that made no sense. He thought of a chance to bring meaning to their loss. I'll do it, he said before he could think too much. The words felt like a rope thrown into deep water. The Queen studied him. You place yourself in danger for words, she said. Why? Daniel did not answer with poetry. He answered with the truth he had kept like a stone. Because if there is a chance my mother was right, then maybe this fighting can end. Maybe something we call fate or memory can be stronger than those who want us to kill each other. She considered him, then nodded once. Very well. You will have what you need. But understand this. If this is a trap, if you betray us, our response will be swift. I will not risk my people for lies. He met her eyes. And if you betray me? She did not answer. Instead, she walked to the pedestal and placed her hand on the plate. It hummed and a small vial dropped into Daniel's palm. Inside was a grain of dust, almost invisible. This is from an old outpost, she said. It was taken when the outpost fell. It is a clue. Follow it, and you may find more. Daniel felt the weight of the small vial like a promise and a burden. He had been a prisoner, then a curiosity, and now a scout. The roles blurred. Over the next days, he trained with a small team assembled by the Queen. They were a curious mix. Aliens who had doubted the purpose of constant war and humans who had been taken from shattered worlds. They moved through ruins and docking yards, learning to speak a few words in each other's tongues. Daniel taught them how to set a simple trap using scraps of metal. They taught him how to read the glow marks of their scanners. Often at night, they sat around a meager fire and spoke in quiet voices about home. One night, as the group rested in a ruined trading post, an old alien named Kala told a story. His voice was thin but steady. My mother carried a cloth with the mark, he said. She embroidered it into her shawl and hummed songs from a place she never saw. She said the bridge keepers taught that trust is a chain. Each person who kept the mark is a link. Daniel thought of the simple chain on his chest. He had thought of it only as a token of his mother's love. Now it felt like a link in a chain that tugged at many hands. The team found small things. Plates with tiny marks, a carved bowl under rubble, a faded painting in an abandoned shrine. Each piece whispered the same idea. Once there had been bridges between worlds. Each find made the Queen hope and her rivals angrier. Rumors began to spread like sparks. When they returned to the Queen with their discoveries, the court listened with a mixture of awe and fear. The Queen presented the relics carefully. Her rivals called them tricks, coincidences, nothing more. But some of her advisors, the older ones who had seen too many pointless wars, looked at the relics with something like wonder. And Daniel, once a prisoner with a simple pendant, felt the edges of his life change. He was no longer simply a soldier taken in battle. He was a keeper of a story that might still be able to mend what had been broken. That thought made his hands shake and his heart steady at the same. The air was thick with tension as Daniel and his small team of human and alien scouts returned from the ruined outpost. The relics they had found were small yet powerful, pieces of history that spoke of peace between humans and aliens long before war divided their worlds. Daniel carried the plate, the tiny carvings etched with the same mark as his necklace, and felt its weight like a promise. The Queen awaited them in the main chamber, flanked by her most loyal advisors. Her silver eyes scanned the relics, lingering on each one, calculating, judging. But for the first time, Daniel noticed something else. Worry. Even with all her power, there was a fear in her gaze he had never seen. "Returnees," she said, her voice echoing across the hall. "Report what you have found." Daniel stepped forward. He placed the plate on the table. "We found remnants of the outpost. Plates, bowls, tablets, all with markings that match the pendant and the other relics in your archive. It shows that humans were once connected with your people in ways history has forgotten. Murmurs ran through the court. Some nodded in wonder, others sneered. One of the Queen's generals, a tall alien with jagged armor, stepped forward. His name was Thalan, and he had long resented the Queen's occasional acts of mercy. "This is irrelevant," Thalan said sharply. "These are scraps of old stories. Our enemies use them as an excuse to appear important. This human is a prisoner, nothing more." The Queen's gaze hardened. "And you would kill a prisoner to prove yourself loyal?" Thalan's jaw tightened. "He is dangerous. He brings ideas that weaken the Empire, knowledge that is not ours to share. This symbol cannot belong to a human. It is a sign meant for our people." The Queen stood abruptly. The room seemed to shrink under her presence. "I have commanded that he be protected," she shouted. "I will not see you destroy what may be the key to peace." Thalan's eyes flashed. "And if peace is a lie? What if it is a trap? You are blinded by sentiment." Daniel felt the tension coil like a snake around the room. The Queen's advisors whispered among themselves, divided between fear of Thalan and hope for what Daniel had found. Daniel knew that this confrontation would not end with words. The Queen raised a hand, commanding silence. "Enough," she said. "I will decide the path forward. You will follow my orders, or you will answer for defiance." Thalan bowed his head, but the glint in his eyes betrayed him. He had already made a plan. That night, Daniel was kept in the same chamber as before, under guard. He tried to rest, but the whispers outside the walls of the chamber kept him alert. Something was coming. He had learned to read subtle signals. Guards moving differently, a slight pause in footsteps, the shift of air in the corridors. Danger was near. Sure enough, around the time when the second cycle of artificial stars would have completed their rotation, the guards outside shifted positions. The door, normally solid and secured, was unlocked from the outside. Daniel felt the warning in his gut instantly. Before he could react, Thalan and a squad of loyal soldiers burst into the chamber. They moved with precision, weapons drawn. Their intent was clear: capture him and kill him, removing the obstacle from their path. Daniel acted without hesitation. He ducked, grabbing a nearby metal rod left in the chamber for maintenance. Sparks flew as it collided with the soldiers' weapons. He was outnumbered, but he knew this space intimately now. Each corner, each shadow, each low panel could be used for cover or advantage. The first soldier lunged. Daniel sidestepped and pushed him into the wall, the armor denting with a loud clang. Another soldier came from the side. He swung the rod, striking a control panel. A jolt of electricity surged, sending the alien soldier backward with a scream. But more came, and Daniel realized brute force alone would not be enough. He darted toward the door, but it was blocked by Thalan himself. "You cannot escape," Thalan growled. "Your queen protects you, but she cannot be here forever." Daniel's mind raced. He looked for anything he could use as leverage. His eyes fell on the pendant around his neck. An idea sparked. He reached under his uniform and touched the pendant. The Queen had once told him the symbol represented unity, trust, and connection. He didn't fully understand it yet, but he felt something stir. A confidence. A belief that he was part of something larger than himself. The soldier lunging at him hesitated for just a second. And in that split second, Daniel kicked him aside and vaulted toward the wall panels. He yanked one open, revealing a narrow maintenance shaft. Without a thought, he dove inside, rolling down the metal passage. Thalan roared in frustration. "Stop him!" Daniel crawled through the shaft, emerging in a corridor near the Queen's inner chambers. His heart pounded, but he moved quickly, staying low, keeping to shadows. He found himself outside the Queen's door, listening. Inside, she was speaking in a low voice. He couldn't understand the words, but the tone carried urgency and alarm. She was aware that betrayal was near. She had not acted blindly. Daniel made his choice. He burst into the Queen's chamber, drawing the attention of the intruding soldiers. His sudden appearance gave her an opening. She nodded sharply, almost imperceptibly. Daniel understood. He turned and faced Thalan as the soldiers poured in. "I will not let you hurt her!" he shouted. Thalan laughed. "A human protecting a queen? You are foolish." But Daniel did not hesitate. Using a combination of human agility and his team's improvised techniques, he managed to hold the line just long enough. The Queen moved behind him, her presence commanding, her armor gleaming. Together they fought, not as prisoner and captor, but as allies. Daniel blocked, parried, and struck. The Queen, surprisingly fast, wielded a short energy blade. cutting the soldiers' weapons and forcing them to retreat. In the chaos, Daniel realized what he had always suspected. The Queen was not invincible, but she was fearless when she believed in her cause. Her strength was not just physical. It was in her conviction, in her ability to inspire loyalty and fear at the same time. Thalan saw the tide turning. He called for retreat, but before his soldiers could escape, the Queen extended her hand and a device on her wrist emitted a pulse that temporarily disabled the intruders' armor systems. Sparks flew, armor failed, and the soldiers fell to the ground stunned. Daniel lowered his weapon, breathing heavily. The room was quiet except for the hum of the Queen's devices. Thalan lay against a wall, glaring but defeated. The Queen turned to Daniel. "You risked your life for me," she said, her voice calm now but filled with intensity. "Why?" Daniel wiped sweat from his brow. "Because if you die, nothing changes. And because the relic, your history, it's bigger than me, bigger than war. It deserves a chance." Her silver eyes softened. "Few have ever understood the weight of that. Most humans see only survival. You see purpose." For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, the guards regrouped, whispering about the failed coup. Word would reach the rest of the Empire, and Daniel knew that Thalan would not give up easily. But in this moment, the bond between him and the Queen was undeniable. She approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder, not in control, but in acknowledgement. "We will need more than courage to survive what comes next," she said. Daniel nodded. "Then we fight together." The Queen's lips curved faintly. "Yes," she said, "but trust will be our greatest weapon." In the following days, the Queen reorganized her loyal forces, while Daniel trained with them. The failed coup had shaken the Empire, and whispers of the human soldier who had saved the Queen spread quickly. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was a symbol of hope, an unexpected champion in a galaxy ruled by war. At night, Daniel often sat with his pendant in hand, thinking of his mother and the chain of events that had brought him here. He had been captured, humiliated, and nearly killed, but now he stood as a bridge between two species, and the Queen, once a distant, terrifying figure, was now an ally, a strategist, and perhaps the first person to see him not as a human enemy, but as someone with a role to play in shaping the galaxy's future. The betrayal had changed everything. It had forced Daniel to act, to protect, and to earn the Queen's trust. And as he looked toward the future, he knew that more challenges awaited, more enemies lurked in the shadows, and more secrets about the relic and the lost bridges between worlds were waiting to be uncovered. But Daniel no longer feared what came next. He had faced betrayal, stood against impossible odds, and survived, and now he was ready for the revelations that would follow. The Queen stood on the balcony of her command chamber, overlooking the sprawling city of her capital. Smoke from battle still lingered on the horizon, a reminder that war had not ended, even if a temporary calm had returned. Daniel stood beside her, his hands folded behind his back, his eyes scanning the distant horizon. It had been weeks since Thalan's betrayal, weeks filled with preparations, planning, and the quiet tension of knowing that another challenge could strike at any moment. The relics they had discovered, the plates, tablets, and the small silver pendant Daniel wore, had become more than symbols. They were keys to a past long forgotten, and perhaps the hope for a future where humans and aliens could coexist. The Queen's silver eyes rested on Daniel. "You have grown since the first day you came to my court," she said softly. "Not just in skill, but in understanding." Daniel gave a small shrug. "I had no choice. If I failed, it would not have been only my life at risk. Your life, the lives of your people, it would all have been lost." She studied him, and for the first time, Daniel saw her not as the ruler who had captured him, but as someone weighed down by responsibility, someone who feared failure as much as she feared enemies. "And yet you chose to risk yourself anyway," she said. "You are not just a soldier, Daniel. You are something far more important, a bridge." He looked down at his pendant, tracing the familiar markings with his thumb. "I never asked for this, my mother. She gave me this, and I didn't understand why it mattered. But now I do, and I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." The Queen nodded. "Then you understand the choice before you." The council chamber had been called. Today the Queen would present their findings to her advisors, including the relics that Daniel and the team had retrieved. These relics, the symbols of peace and unity from an age long before the Empire's rise, could sway the course of war. As Daniel entered, He noticed the mix of anticipation and skepticism among the gathered officials. Some whispered to each other, others avoided his gaze, and a few studied him with open curiosity. The Queen stepped forward, her voice carrying across the chamber. "We have found evidence," she said, gesturing toward the relics displayed on a low table. "Evidence that humans and aliens shared knowledge, trade, and trust long before the wars began. This is a reminder that our past is not as divided as we have been taught." Murmurs ran through the room. Some officials nodded, impressed. Others, like Thalan's followers, looked uneasy, their hands twitching near their weapons. Daniel stepped forward. "These relics are proof that cooperation is possible," he said clearly. "Not just as an idea, but as history. My mother's pendant, it carried a symbol that survived centuries. It proves that bridges between our peoples existed before, and they can exist again." There was a pause. The room was silent except for the hum of machinery and the faint whispers of those unsure of how to react. Then one of the older advisors, an alien scholar with a long beard-like appendage, spoke. "If this is true, then the relics carry weight beyond what we have imagined. They could prevent further bloodshed." Another voice cut in, sharp and skeptical. "Or they could be a ruse to weaken our empire. How do we know this human does not lie?" Daniel met the gaze of the skeptic, calm and resolute. "Because if I were lying, I would have no reason to risk my life for you or your queen. My only goal has been to preserve knowledge, to protect these relics, and to ensure that our mistakes are not repeated." The room was tense. The weight of history, the promise of peace, and the threat of betrayal hung in the air. Finally, the Queen spoke. "The choice before us is clear. We can continue as we have, letting fear and pride dictate our actions, or we can embrace the path these relics show us. It is a path of cooperation, understanding, and perhaps reconciliation with humanity." Thalan's voice cut through the chamber like steel. "This is madness. To trust humans is to invite betrayal. To change the Empire's ways because of a few symbols is foolish." The Queen's silver eyes flared. "And yet it is a choice we must make. Either we let history guide us or we remain blind to its lessons and perish in our own arrogance." Daniel felt a surge of determination. This was the moment he had been preparing for, not just as a soldier but as a bridge between worlds. "I stand with the Queen," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "Not as a prisoner, not as a soldier, but as someone who believes in the possibility of unity. We can end this war if you are willing to take that step." A hush fell over the room. The tension was palpable. For the first time, Daniel saw some of Thalan's supporters hesitate. Doubt had crept into their hearts. The Queen took a deep breath. "Then it is decided. We will follow the path the relics have illuminated. We will reach out to human leaders. We will show them that peace is possible. And we will protect those who choose cooperation, even if it means facing those who do not." Thalan's face twisted in anger. "You will regret this. History favors strength, not sentiment." She did not flinch. "History favors those who learn from it. And I intend to lead my people wisely." In the weeks that followed, Daniel and the Queen worked tirelessly to prepare messages of peace and coordination. The relics were displayed, their history explained to both alien and human audiences. Word spread slowly but deliberately. Humans who had once fought in the war looked upon the relics with awe, realizing that these symbols were not just objects but keys to understanding and trust. Meanwhile, within the Empire, the Queen faced resistance from Thalan and his followers. There were skirmishes, attempts to undermine her rule, and whispered threats. But Daniel stood beside her, offering both strategy and courage. Together, they planned defensive measures while pursuing diplomatic openings with human leaders. One day, a message arrived from a human fleet approaching the Empire. Daniel was tasked with leading a small delegation aboard a human ship. The relics would be presented and the Queen's intentions explained. He felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. If this failed, war could reignite across both human and alien worlds. As they traveled, Daniel reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the battlefield where he had been captured, to the Queen's court, to the discovery of the relics, he had been shaped by every decision, every risk, every moment of trust. The pendant around his neck seemed heavier now, as if it carried the weight of destiny itself. When they arrived at the human vessel, the delegation was met with cautious suspicion. Daniel stepped forward, showing the relics and explaining their significance. These objects are proof that humans and aliens share a past, he said. They are reminders that peace has been possible before and it can be again. We come not as conquerors or captives, but as allies seeking understanding. The human leaders studied the relics, then looked at Daniel. One of them, an older admiral, spoke. This changes everything. If what you say is true, then the wars we have fought have been based on fear, not reality. Daniel nodded. Yes, but we cannot stop now. We must act together before those who profit from war can destroy this chance. Back on the Queen's capital, Thalan had gathered his forces, preparing for one final attempt to seize power. But when he moved, he found himself facing the united front of those loyal to the Queen, strengthened by the support of humans who now understood the relics. Thalan's rebellion was crushed not with overwhelming force, but with the combined strategy, planning, and trust that Daniel and the Queen had fostered. The Queen watched from her balcony as the remnants of Thalan's followers surrendered. She turned to Daniel, her expression unreadable for a moment, then softened. You have done more than survive, she said. You have changed the course of history. Daniel shook his head. I did not do this alone. You trusted me when others wanted me dead. That trust? It made this possible. She smiled faintly. And now the final choice remains. Daniel frowned. What choice? She gestured toward the relics now displayed prominently in the main chamber. These relics prove the path to peace, but they also represent a decision to continue the empire as it has always been, or to embrace a new way. One that requires cooperation, honesty, and shared leadership. One that may be more difficult than war, but far more enduring. Daniel thought of the bloodshed, the fear, the countless lives lost. He thought of the Queen, once a terrifying figure, now a leader willing to risk everything for the possibility of unity. He looked at the pendant and felt the chain of history connecting him to this moment. He nodded. We take the path of unity. We risk for peace. We choose to build rather than destroy. The Queen's silver eyes glimmered. Then it is done.